tongue. These are not the only salivary glands. We also have many minor salivary glands that are lining the cheek walls and under your tongue as well. So they're also excreting or secreting the saliva into your mouth. But these are the three main ones that people talk about, the parotid, submandibulars, and sublingual.
Are there two of these?
There should be two of these. Yeah. As opposed to the tonsils where there's two and everything except for the adenoids, there's only one adenoid. Which is weird, because we were talking about that before class, that adenoids is plural, but there's one. Yeah. So notice on your worksheet that we secrete about 1 liter to 1.5 liters of saliva per day. That's a lot of fluid that we are pumping into our mouth. In fact, you'll notice as we go through the digestive system, we pump out a ton of fluid to help digest our food, starting here with about 1 liter of saliva. Saliva is mostly water. You'll notice there's some electrolytes dissolved there, sodium, potassium, and chlorine, for instance. Saliva also contains an enzyme known as amylase. How did you know that amylase was an enzyme?
ASC.
ASC. So here, this is the very first time we've talked about chemical digestion of food. So starting in your mouth, we will start the digestion of starches through salivary amylase action. If you've ever taken a piece of bread and held it in your mouth for several minutes, you might notice, I know how gross, you might notice after 10 or 15 minutes, instead of having a starchy taste to it, that bread will actually turn to a more sweet taste. It takes that long for salivary amylase to really have any effective action on those starches. So it's not that starch digestion is complete here in the mouth. We just start the tip of the iceberg here with digesting those starches. So amylase breaks down starch in the mouth. You probably noticed that saliva is not necessarily runny as water. It's not, as fluid as water, you might say. It's a little more viscous or thicker than water. That is thanks to the next bullet point there, known as mucin. Mucin actually is what forms mucus, makes it a little thicker than water as well. So kind of a disgusting thought to think that saliva is partly mucus. So saliva also contains a little bit of serous fluid. You might recall that serous fluid is found between those serous membranes. So it's not just water, it's a little serous fluid and a little mucus as well. You probably know what activates us to salivate. Of course, if I talk about warm chocolate cake straight out of the oven, and we're going to put some icing on it and maybe serve it up with some ice cream. If that sounds tasty to you, then your mouth is going to start salivating based on those nervous system suggestions of food. So simply talking about food, smelling food, and then of course placing food into your mouth will all elicit the production of saliva. Here's an old friend, parasympathetic division of the ANS. What does the parasympathetic division promote?
Rest and digest.
Rest and digest, good. So parasympathetic division is all about digesting food. So parasympathetic stimulation will also promote us to produce saliva. Interesting how the last little point there, nausea will also promote salivation. Why do you think we salivate when we're about to vomit?
They don't build a lot of
Good. Acid in the esophagus help to lubricate it, and also to help lubricate the passage of that food to come back up into the mouth area. So it's a twofold issue there. But of course, nausea and toxins in your digestive system, even digestion of spicy foods like Mexican food or hyperacidity, somebody who has an extremely acid stomach for whatever reason, those types of things can also promote salivation. So again, it is about protecting the digestive tract. The esophagus and the mouth are really not built to accommodate excess acid, so we're looking at protecting those features. All right, at the bottom down there, three main jobs of the mouth. What is ingestion?
Taking in food.
Taking in food. It's not indigestion. It's not, gaseous stomach. It's simply putting food in your mouth. Mechanical digestion does occur here through mastication. As you probably know, mastication is chewing, so that involves the teeth and the tongue chewing up the food. So mastication is mechanical, while salivary amylase is involved in chemical digestion. So we actually do begin both mechanical and chemical digestion in the mouth. Ooh. how important saliva is, this is what we call meth mouth. I'm sure you've heard of methamphetamine, crystal meth. This is all they need to show people, right?
Yes.
Who's going to kiss that mouth, right? Yeah, another person with a mouth like that. Two problems here. If you're on crystal meth, you don't give a about brushing your teeth. So that's the last worry in your world is to have sanitation or hygiene of your mouth. So lack of dental hygiene is one reason for this issue called meth mouth. The second reason, crystal meth actually reduces saliva production. So the less saliva you have, the more the acids in your mouth and the bacteria can play, and the bacteria can actually digest away the teeth. So you can see what damage it's done, not just to the teeth, but also the gums here. So it's a twofold issue with crystal meth. And this is not just a meth addict problem. This can also be other drug addict problems. But it tends to be, more associated with meth because it does reduce saliva production. All right. Moving on to cleaner topics. How about questions so far? They should start showing that in 6th and 8th grade, shouldn't they? Well, as you start to digest your food, you will mush it up into a little mushy, moistened ball. That moistened ball of food is called a bolus. And at the point that you decide to swallow it, we will then push it back here to the throat area. Which region of the throat is going to be involved in initiating swallowing? It is the pharynx. Is it naso, oral, or laryngo? Oral. Good. Because that's, of course, the area of your throat that's adjacent to your mouth. So the pharynx, here you'll notice, is important in swallowing. And only the two regions, oral and laryngo, are going to be involved in swallowing that food. Nasopharynx is not going to be involved unless, of course, it's emesis. Emesis is vomiting, so that's not going to be a player here for digesting food unless it's coming back up. Alright, so you notice that we have now two muscularis external layers in the pharynx. What are those two layers? One is circular, right? One is longitudinal. So now we start seeing those four layers of the digestive tract start to emerge. Here with the pharynx, we do have two layers, a circular layer and a longitudinal layer, that will help massage and move that food along by peristalsis. The reason we have these two layers here is they are involved in deglutition. What is deglutition? Swallowing, yes, just swallowing. So mastication is just simply chewing. Now deglutition is simply swallowing. You notice we have two main phases of swallowing. One is called the buccal phase, and the other is a fancy word called the pharyngeal esophageal phase. Break it down. What is bucca? Cheek. That's the portion of the phase where you're actively chewing and you consciously decide to swallow your food. Whether you realize it or not, when you're chewing food, you make the decision to push that food back to the back of your mouth so you can swallow it. So the conscious portion, the voluntary phase, is the buccal phase. When you push that food back to the back of your mouth, your body then starts to take over, and this becomes the involuntary pharyngeal esophageal phase. At the point that the involuntary phase takes over, it's really difficult to gain control over that food again because it starts on its own conveyor belt, so to speak, down the pharynx and then starts down the esophagus from that point. So we really don't have control once it enters the pharynx and the esophagus. I want you to notice here at the very bottom of that number 2, if you're having something like liquids, they only take about a second or two to reach the stomach. You probably noticed that if you have a cold drink, boom, it hits your stomach immediately.